Hello everyone, welcome to another video. I think this one will be hopefully helpful for people who were like me, um, are kind of getting back into the game, especially if you're like me who's a Yugi boomer, kind of fell out of really following the game and playing it around the Synchro era or even earlier, and just trying to jump back into this whole thing. So what I think is a great game, but certainly has barriers to new players that really can't be easily overcome. But when I kind of started, at first I was like super overwhelmed. Like there was so much going on. Like XZs I had heard about and kind of dabbled with a little bit, but didn't really seriously play. And then links were just completely new. Pendulum was something I wasn't familiar with, so kind of like, okay, how am I going to deal with all this? And like effectively now, like good stuff piles are basically gone in favor of either like stun piles or what is kind of the way Yu-Gi-Oh is done now is just like archetype based deck building. But kind of how do you figure out how to do that? And for me, I kind of devised a my four step program in how to do this essentially. Like, how do you go from being like a, a new player entering the game and trying to figure out like where to go with Master Duel, what to do, to actually being able to like build a deck properly? Because that's really the big thing is like you can you can get good results at Yu-Gi-Oh, but not really know how to deck build per se. You can just net deck, put something together that you saw in YGO Pro Deck, and then call it a day. But this is kind of one of the things like this system that I used was a way that I kind of found useful for me in learning how to actually deck build, how cards interact with each other, how they work towards an end goal. But yeah, I think that's kind of a little sweetener, a little tease for you. And now we're going to get into the actual juice of things with number one. There it is on the thing. Number one, it just says archetypes. But really, what that means is choose an archetype. So you're a new player, you're kind of like, okay, like, you downloaded Master Duel, whatever. And now you're like, okay, where the hell do I go from here? So the easiest way, what at least I thought was a good way to kind of learn, like, just start like, Google like 2023, 2024 Yu-Gi-Oh archetypes or and go from there because you'll get results. You can go deck build packs, stuff like that, and kind of be like, oh, 2023, there was Kashtira, there was Rescue Ace, Unchained, all these different decks, and you kind of just get the flavor for them. You don't have to get in depth into like their style, and what they are like supposed to do right away, but you kind of got to get an idea. Like why learn a deck if you don't like it? It doesn't necessarily need to be a competitive deck, but you need to like kind of start with that. So essentially, that's kind of the first step here. We're gonna talk about that step first. But yeah, I guess we kind of already did talk about that step. It's archetypes, finding something you like, and then going from there. Step two. So step two, read, read. You gotta go out there and you gotta read. You gotta put some time into this game. The rewards for being good at Yu-Gi-Oh are great. You will feel I think I play Pokemon as well. I feel way more accomplished when I come up with something great in Yu-Gi-Oh or something like a cool tech option or something like that. I feel way better about it in Yu-Gi-Oh than I do in Pokemon. Pokemon is just a different game. It's a great game. I won't say anything bad about it, but you gotta read. You gotta read. That's how you figure out what the frick your cards are supposed to do. That's how you figure out what your card's win condition is going to be. So first, you figure out your archetype. Let's say we'll go with something with some new stuff today. We'll get to that, but we'll start with Memento. Then you got to read. We'll go through these steps together later, but you got to read. I just want to emphasize that right now. You don't read, you're gonna just spend the whole time wondering what the frick your deck does and just be waiting for glowing things on Master Duel. That's not gonna help you out in the TCG. You got to play with paper or even on Dueling Book. You're not going to have the flashing light telling you to do something. And then even if you do have the flashing light telling you to do something, if you don't read your cards, you might screw yourself over. So yeah, read. All right. Step number 3 is build. We're gonna do one word steps. Build. So you've decided your archetype. Read and build can actually be kind of like mixed together. You can do them at the same time, but they're kind of more like an emphasis thing. Like you read your cards and build your deck accordingly. Don't just be like, oh, okay, cool. I want to play Kashtira. I want to play Memento. I want to play Rescue Ace. I'm just gonna go on YGO Pro Deck, take it, and then just kind of skim the cards, and I'm sure I'll figure out what they do. It's like, no, 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 no. You pick an archetype, you read all the cards in it, and then you build it. Or you can do them together. You can kind of build it as you read, more or less. Because if you don't read the cards, you won't know what your starters are, you won't know what your extenders are, you won't know what you're doing. So there's the keys. And then the final one, 4, lore. Final step, try it. You don't just immediately copy somebody else's deck. Go, once you've built and read, you've chosen your archetype, you have built your deck, you've read your cards in the same order or mixed, whatever you want to do, and then you got to try it. See where things go. You don't need the one thing you'll learn, or at least that I learned at least when I was starting to do like deck building and kind of like trying to do things on my own, was that it's like the worst thing you can do is just automatically take somebody else's idea. It can help you, but the reality is you don't learn how your deck works. You don't learn really, and you don't really give yourself the opportunity to get creative with it. That is the thing. Yu-Gi-Oh has a massive card pool, nearly 15,000 cards. Like maybe you can find something cool. But those are the 4 steps. Now we're gonna get into the practical part. We've done the written exam. Now we're doing the practical. Hope you were taking notes. Hello, everybody, again. There's the 4 steps. I don't know if you can read them in the thumbnail size thing, but whatever, the 4 steps. So, for our first step, let's pick an archetype. For me, this time, I usually do stuff with Rescue Ace, but today I'm going to try to be a little bit more creative than that, and I'm going to pick, let's say Memento, because I like Memento. I think they're cool. And there's some new stuff coming out, and they're somewhat relevant. So, here we go. All right. So now we got all our mementos. Looking great. 8. So now you've done it. So the first thing you want to do is kind of figure out what your win condition is going to be. That's part of the reading. You'll go through your cards, you'll read them. You can even do this during the archetype like overview, really. You could do it there. If you went and read like a little like blurb about Kashtira, it would kind of say like, oh, Kashtira's boss monster, Arise Heart, is kind of your winning condition. Getting him on field creates a walking, talking 3,000 attack defense macrocosmos that essentially banishes something every chain. Really strong card. That's kind of your win condition. With Rescue Ace, it's Turbulence, set 4, and then pass, potentially. Could eat at its core, that's what Rescue Ace's like archetype is built to do. For Memento, it is this guy. Mementolin Tectulicta Combined Creation. We're just going to call him Combined Creation because I'm not going to be able to pronounce Tectulicta too often. So yeah, so he's your win condition. Cannot be normal summon set. Must be special summoned by from your hand or graveyard by shuffling 5 other mementos with different names from your hand deck or from your hand or graveyard into the deck / extra deck. While you control no other monsters, this card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each, and then once per turn, if your opponent activates a card effect, except during the damage step, you can special summon 1 memento monster from your hand. So he's your win condition. Get this guy on field, do a ton of damage. 5,000 attack and defense shouldn't be too difficult to do. So now you know what the end goal is. So you got to work backwards. How do you get to combined creation? Well, you start looking at the other cards. So you got Memento Mictalin, which is their field spell. If your Memento monster battles, your opponent cannot activate spell traps until the end of the damage step, and if a monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target one of those monsters and special summon a Memento with a lower level from your hand or graveyard, and you can only use this effect once per turn. So, not too bad. I know, also, during your end phase, you can target a Memento spell trap in your graveyard and set it. So there you go. You can essentially do this. So Memento Mictalin, how does it facilitate getting the big boy on the field? Not particularly. It's more like a grind game piece that's really for turns. Like it can help set up on turn one with other cards, which we'll get into. But you'll want to play a copy of it. It's important to have it in the deck. So you add him. Now we're kind of moving on to the next guy. This guy is OCG only right now, but he'll be coming out in July in The Infinite Forbidden. He is a combined creator, Memento and his materials are 3 Memento monsters. You can banish this card from your graveyard, add a Memento Migdalin from your deck to your hand. Cannot activate the following effects in the same chain. If this card is fusion summoned, you can send 3 Memento cards from your deck and or extra deck to your graveyard. Quick effect. You can target an equal number of Memento monsters you control and cards your opponent controls and destroy them. You can only use each effect once per turn. So he's going to be useful. You're going to want to have a couple of him. He facilitates getting bodies in the graveyard to get the combined creation out on field. So he's important. Anguish. If this card is normal summoned or special summoned, you can add 1 Memento monster from your deck to your hand, except for herself. And you can target 1 level 2 or lower Memento monster in your graveyard, destroy a Memento monster you control, and if you do special summon the target monster, you can only use each of these effects once per turn. So she's effectively she's a starter. She can search out another Memento monster. She can destroy herself and then special summon targeted monsters. So you'll want 3 of her. She is key. We're gonna not continue to go dead in order here because I want to we're on the topic of starters. We're going to continue with starters. So Darkblade is kind of the next starter. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can discard a Memento card, target a spell trap your opponent controls and destroy it. That's useful, but not really his starting effect. His starter effect is during the main phase, you can destroy a Memento monster you control, and if you do, special summon 1 level 3 or lower Memento monster from your deck. So he can effectively be used. You can take him, play normal summon him, pop him, special Anguish, add another Memento to hand. Now you have 3 bodies effectively, and that's off of 1 card. So Darkblade you want to play at 3. As a general rule, it's not the end of the world, but as a general rule, you do want to have your starters around 3. You don't need to. Some decks are more flexible than others. They can play 2 or 1 starter, but starters are always good to have at 3. Extenders are a little bit more like free-flowing. They don't need to be played as much, especially if you have ways to access them with your starters. But yeah, continuing on starters, the last of the starters for the Mementolan archetype is Tatsu no Toshigo. If you do not control any face-up monsters other than Memento monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. During your main phase, you can destroy 1 Memento monster you control and send any number of Memento monsters with different names from your deck to the graveyard, whose levels are less than or equal to the destroyed monster's original level. You can only use this effect once per turn. He is a level 5. Darkblade's 4 and Anguish is 3. But yeah, you want to play 3 of him again. He and Darkblade on their own can really start facilitating, but I mean, you can go Darkblade, destroy Darkblade, bring Anguish, special summon, search him out, special summon him off his own effect, and then there you go. And then you can destroy him, and then add monsters up to the monsters to the graveyard equal to level 5. And that's where other cards that are essentially extending plays kind of come into play. Like the new one, Mementolan Mystical Sheep, who's also coming out in Infinite Forbidden. If a monster is destroyed by a card effect this turn, you can special summon this card from your hand. So if you draw it and another Memento, the other Memento can pop itself. You can use this. He's not a dead card, and you still get a special summon off of him. If this card is normal or special summoned, except during the damage step, you can fusion summon 1 Memento monster from your deck using monsters from your hand or graveyard or field as material. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can send 1 Memento card from your deck to the graveyard, except for Memento and Mystical Sheep. You can only use each effect once per turn. So he's an extender more than a starter. You wouldn't want to draw 3 or 2 of him. You really don't even care if you draw him at all, because you can facilitate him getting onto the field, or at least into your hand, via Tatsuchi no Shoshigo, or C. So you can play him at 1. Because you kind of, like, you have to understand, like, as you read through, you want to see, like, how many cards are you getting off of a card. In the case of Darkblade, he's 1 card, so you start with 1 in your hand, you play him, you destroy him, you special Anguish from your deck, and then Anguish adds. So you're really going +1 into Tetsuchi Noko, and then with Tetsuchi no Doshigo, you're going into essentially potentially +3 or +2. To +2 is the more common play. Like you're gaining card advantage essentially. But yeah, so he's definitely going to be a target you're going to want to use for Tetsuchi no Toshigo. But because he's level 3 and Tetsuchi Noko is level 5, you still have room for potentially 2 level 1s or 1 level 2. And your level 2 that you'll probably want to grab is Gaddock. If this card is normal or a special summon, you can target a memento in your graveyard, except for Gaddock, and add it to your hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard by a memento monster's effect, you can special summon him. So essentially, what you can do, you want to play one of him. You pop your Tetsuto no Toshigo, you send him and him. He specials himself back from the graveyard, adds him to hand. He is now able to use his effect to special summon himself, and now you have 2 materials for fusion, potentially 3 depending on how many cards you manage to get on field. And yeah, so those are 2 of your kind of your main extenders essentially. Then you've got these 2, Mace and Goblin, which are more like battle tricks. Goblin actually has a decent starting effect, but during the main phase, if you control Combined Creation, quick effect, you can discard this card the rest of your turn. You cannot opponent cannot target memento monsters you control with card effects. During your main phase, you can destroy 1 memento monster you control, and if you do, send up to 2 with different names from the graveyard other than him. So you can use him to fill your graveyard as well. You could send Gaddock and something else, and then you can use Gaddock's effect to really grab anyone else. So Goblin isn't a dead card by any means, but you don't really need to play more than one of him, because the other cards are so effective at getting bodies in the graveyard and really getting your plays going. And then Mace. During your opponent's main phase, if you control him until to Kalin Combined Creation, you can discard this card, target a face-up monster your opponent controls, and take control of it to the end phase. So a good way to protect from something that could maybe beat over Combined Creation, or have an effect that allows your opponent to remove him in a different way. Or even just, if you're pushing for OTK, or you're pushing for lethal damage, a good way to get rid of a body on the field and take control of it. And then during your main phase, you can destroy a memento monster you control, and if you do, add 1 memento from your deck to your hand, except for Mace. I'm going to move this over here. So we're going to get into the spells now. The biggest one is probably, well, it could be Fusion or Bone Party. Fusion is basically during the main phase, Fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material, including a memento monster. So the nice thing is here, it's not limited to mementos. You can actually use it to summon other valuable fusion monsters that have more generic materials. As something like a Guardian Chimera could be summoned off of this. But as we already discussed, you kind of have a very good target for this already in the Combined Creator. If a monster in your possession was destroyed by a card effect this turn, you can also shuffle memento monsters from your graveyard into your head. So that's kind of an extra added benefit. This card essentially is a fusion card, and then it also says you can also use your mementos that might already be in the graveyard, shuffle them back. So if you're at a point where you have enough bodies maybe to go into Combined Creation, you can use this and maybe extend plays, change your lines a little bit, and potentially get more advantage that way. And then during your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, destroy a monster you control, and if you do, add 1 memento spell trap from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. So that's essentially, on top of it being a decent spell, it is also a spell searcher. And you'll want to play 3. You can maybe, I've seen sets with 2, it depends on what you're doing as far as flexibility. Some people play 2 to add other engines into this deck. I've been experimenting with 2 with Chimera a little bit, but right now the standard seems to be 3. The next spell is Mementolan Bone Party. Destroy a memento monster in your hand or face up field, and then take 1 from your deck with a different name and either add it to your hand or special summon it in defense. During your main phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard and then target a memento monster you control. If it attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing damage to your opponent. You can only use each effect of Mementolan Bone Party once per turn. So Bone Party is a starter card. You'd really just, it's not a 1-card combo per se because you do need to have a memento to destroy. But it's still useful at 3, and I think you're playing enough monsters. I mean, you've got 14 different memento main deck monsters here already, potentially 15. We missed out on one of them at the bottom there, but we'll get to him in a second. We'll just go back. So you've got plenty of targets. You're probably not going to brick on this, but it does get your plays going, and it gets a body in the graveyard to facilitate combined creation coming to the field. The Memento main deck monster we missed was Horn Dragon. He can go here. If you have 3 or more Memento monsters with different names, you can special summon them from your hand, and you can only special them once per turn. If this card is destroyed by card effect, you can target up to 3 face-up cards on the field, including a Memento card you control, and destroy them. So he can essentially be used as a form of removal. Face-up cards, the nice thing is you destroy one of your, let's say you have him and another Memento. You then destroy a Memento, or destroy him with a Memento. He's destroyed by card effect. Now you destroy another Memento, and you can destroy 2 cards your opponent controls. Pretty useful, but doesn't need to be played by at more than one, really, because he is a bit more conditional, and he doesn't really get you to combine creation. All right, and it gives you another name, which is important, because you do need 5 different names. Okay, continuing on. The last spell is Bone Back. If a face-up Memento monster you control leaves the field because of an opponent's card, special summon a Memento, combine creation from your hand or deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. If your opponent moves a Memento monster out of your graveyard while this card is in your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can banish this card, special summon as many Memento monsters as possible with different names from your hand and or deck. You can only use each effect of this card once per turn. It's a decent card. It sounds really good on paper, like being able to just summon the boss monster of this archetype sounds great, but really it's a side deck card at best. It's not useful enough to play all the time. It's conditional on your opponent doing something. Your opponent could just choose to play around it. Sorry. I mean, it is leaves the field, so it is very open-ended that way, but at the same time, like if your opponent's like if it could be a game, that's why I put it in the side. It's more like a game 2 like tech option, whereas it's like in game 1, like you use it, your opponent actually gets like somehow procs it. They could be like, oh crap, but at the same time, after that, after you get them once with it, you're not going to be able to get them in game 2 and 3. They're going to be aware of it. If you have it as a set card, they're going to be ready and waiting for it. So yeah, so he's a side deck card, or it's a side deck card. Should gender these things. Fracture Dance. If you control, this is the first trap of 2. If you control a Memento monster, target 1 card on the field, destroy it. And if you control Combine Creation, you can destroy 1 more card. When an attack is declared involving your Memento monster and an opponent's monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard. All monsters your opponent currently control lose 1,000 attack. So I mean, if in the odd chance that somebody could go over your Combine Creation, or you know you don't want to lose some of your weaker monsters, you can banish this. It's a good one of. Probably you can probably search it on through your combo line. And the last trap is very important to the archetype. This is Cranium Burst. While you control a Memento monster, your opponent's monster must attack the Memento with the highest attack you control. If it's tied, it's their choice. When an opponent activates a monster effect on the field, except during the damage step, you can target 1 combined creation you control. It loses exactly 1,000 attack and defense, and if it does, negate the activated effect. You can only use this effect once per chain. So essentially, it's like it turns combined creation into an Appaloosa, a 5-time monster negate. But you only need to play 1. Again, because like the other trap, it's very searchable through your combo line. So, moving on. The last of the extra deck monsters is Twin Dragon. So any 2 Memento monsters. So the other one was any 3. This is any 2. Any monster destroyed by battle with your Memento monsters is banished, and you can only use the following effects of Memento Twin Dragon once per turn. If this card is fusion summoned, you can destroy 1 Memento monster in your hand or face-up field. And if you do, add up to 2 Memento monsters with different names from your deck to your hand. If this fusion summoned card is destroyed, you can special summon a level 6 or lower Memento monster from your graveyard. So if you sent something, like you didn't send Gaddock, or you had Gaddock in hand, so you didn't have the option to send Gaddock with something like Tatsuchi no Toshigo, you did that, and then you were able to, you could send something else to potentially grab from, or special summon, you could send something else with Tatsuchi Noko other than Gaddock, and grab that and special summon it, essentially, if you destroy him. Probably fine to play it too. And that's the Memento archetype. So for this exercise, I kind of put together what I would consider like a strong Memento thing. You may have come up with something different. that will happen. You will but part of this exercise is basically you read every card in an archetype. You try to first you determine, like I said, first you determine the archetype you want to play and its win condition. Then you read all your cards. Then you build your deck based on what you're reading. Because that's part of learning. Is like as you start to understand like, oh, okay, like my end game is this, these cards facilitate that, this one doesn't. So you can kind of like pick and choose. Because the thing is, even within an archetype, it might not be worth to play everything. Rescue Ace, for one example, has Monitor. He's there. He's not worth playing. He doesn't help you get to your boss monster in Turbulence. You might not even want to play Fire Attacker depending on your build. But some people don't play Reinforce, their trap card. So it's kind of like you gotta figure that out, and that's kind of how part of building it is this versus just going on YGO Pro deck and stealing somebody else's or net decking. It's not really stealing per se, but net decking and taking someone else's pre-built deck and just saying, okay, this is fine. And it also teaches you a little bit more. Like you become more intimate with the card effects, and then you can kind of like begin to like have the synapses flaring and be like, oh, okay, like this leads to this and that leads to that. But if you look at the deck, there's 24 cards here. There's a lot of options for non-engine. You could play a buttload of hand traps. You could play a ton of board breakers. There's a lot of options on the side. You could even play another engine in here. I've been trying, like I said, I've been trying it with Chimera. I've seen like some stuff with Albaz, but branded tends to be a bit thicker for it to work. Whereas I found Chimera to be very small but very effective, and it had some synergies because there are fiends and illusions in this deck, as well as Beast, so it kind of worked out nicely. But yeah, so that's basically the process. You find your archetype you like, you read every card, you put them there, and then the last one is try it. I'm not going to do that because this deck's only 24 cards right now, so I can't really try it. But the idea is then you've built your deck before you go and say, okay, like, okay, I have my idea. Like, how did other people do it? Then you go and you try it and you see, okay, I'm finding myself like bricking a lot, or I'm not dealing with interaction well. I'm getting like stumped on a single Ash Blossom. Like, how do I like fix this to make it a little bit more flexible? And that's kind of the try it stage. And then you can take stuff out, put stuff back in, and go from there. And it's really, that's part of the big thing with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like experimenting with the deck. Because if you just automatically take someone else's deck list, you're not going to have that opportunity for yourself and see what you can do to really get like a cool, like potentially a combo nobody else has seen yet. But yeah, that's the video really. Remember the 4-step program. And yeah, happy deck building, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.